did Satan get into Judas? Let me give you some theories that are out there about why Judas did what he did. Some say he did it for the money. You all know that he negotiated with the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin Council. He negotiated for 30 pieces of silver. 30 pieces of silver. That'd be a lot of money today, wouldn't it? 30 silver coins. Wasn't a lot of money then. That was the cost of a slave. It wasn't a lot of money at all. So we can take that theory and we can kind of throw it out the window. It couldn't have been the money. The second thing was, they said that they felt that he would force Jesus into overthrowing the Romans. And that Judas thought that Jesus, being the Messiah, needed somebody to push him on out there. So what he thought was, they said, is that if he went and betrayed him, that when they showed up to get him, that Jesus would have to come on out and say, it's me, I'm the Messiah, I'm God, strike everybody dead, knock down the Romans, and take over. Pretty good theory. Little thought of that one. I don't think that's it either. A third one was, Jesus was a false Messiah. Judas had become dissatisfied with it, so he went off, negotiated, and had them come and get him because Judas was basically saying he's fooling everybody. Since he's fooling everybody, y'all go get him. I don't think that one was it either. Then there's a fourth theory out there that Judas was so zealous for the law that he didn't like the way Jesus went about and seemed to kind of look at the law from the perspective of someone who didn't really care too much about it. So therefore, being mad, he decided he needed to be gotten rid of it. And he never did ever believe that he was actually the Messiah. And that's wrong too. So I'm going to give you what I think really happened. I want you to look over in chapter 12, and let's find verse number 1 of the Gospel of John. Everybody there? All right, I want y'all to pay close attention to this. Then in 6 days before the Passover, so this is about 6 days before Jesus goes to the cross, Jesus came to Bethany where Lazarus was, who had been dead, whom he had raised from the dead. There they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of those who sat at the table with him. Then Mary took a pound of very costly oil of spikenard, anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. Now, notice that it is very costly. All right? But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, who would betray him, said, "Why was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" Now, I want you to notice what he said. Judas got real spiritual. Look at what he said. Why are we wasting this oil? Now, y'all got to stop and think about this for a second. It's being put on Jesus. And Judas says, why are we wasting this expensive oil? We could have sold it. We could have given it to the poor. Doesn't that sound real spiritual? Doesn't that sound like the right thing to do? You got to watch folks when they start talking and you don't really know what their motive is. In verse 6, this he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief. So he's a thief. And had the money box. Eric, this ain't you. And he used to take what was put in it. So, because he kept the money and nobody else kept up with the money, he was stealing the money. So what he wanted was, he said, look, what we should have done is sold the oil, put it in the box so I can put it in my pocket. But I'm going to be spiritual about it. I'm going to say we could have gave it to the poor. This should tell you something. The money that was supposed to be going to the poor was not getting there. If you'll notice, we find out that if he could leave supper, supposedly to go give money to the poor, then the rest of the disciples did not know whether or not he gave it or not. He just came back and gave a report. Yeah, I went out and gave 300 denarii to the poor. No, he put it in his pocket. So he was profiting off of Jesus. Now, how do y'all know Jesus knew exactly what he was doing? Y'all know that, right? Jesus said, I know who I picked. I know exactly what I picked. I know the character of whom I picked. It couldn't be that he saw some promise in Judah. He knew that Judas was a thief when he picked him. So, he is a thief. Look at verse 7. But Jesus said, let her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. For the poor you have with you always, but me you do not have always. Now, he is actually, most people when they read that, they don't realize the context of it. The context of what he's saying is he's talking to Judas. The context here, he is actually rebuking him. Now, have you ever been rebuked? Have you ever been corrected as a grown person in public, in front of other people, on your job as your boss ever corrected you in a meeting? How you feel? Have you ever gone to somebody and said, you know, we need to take this offline? Have you ever gone to him and said, you know what, you really shouldn't have said that to me out in front of everybody? I mean, you could have talked to me. See, anytime we get corrected out in front of other people, we get embarrassed. All you have to do is correct your child out in front of other children. What happens? They get embarrassed. No different. If I were to stand up here, one of you all had done something, and I would sit here and say, hey, don't do that in front of everybody, you probably wouldn't come back. You probably start calling everybody. You see how he did? He ain't a good pastor. A good pastor would have come to me by myself and talked to me. I want you to look at what Jesus did. He corrected him in public. How do you think he feels? Look in the Gospel of Luke. Find chapter 22. Luke is right before John, by the way. Chapter 22, find verse number 3. All right, how do you think you feel? Let me show you how you feel. Then Satan entered Judas, surnamed Iscariot, who was numbered among the 12. Now, I want you to notice here Satan entered it. And look what he did in verse 4. So he went his way and conferred with the chief priests and captains how he might betray him to them. This actually happened after the incident with an alabaster box of water, where he has been corrected in front of everybody. Judas got angry. Now, let me see if we can look at the theology behind what happens when you get angry. Find the book of Ephesians and find chapter 4 and find verse number 26. I want to show you exactly what happened to Judas. The exact same thing that happens to you and I when we get mad. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26. A lot of y'all know the scripture. I'm going to give you time to get there because we're going to sit right there. We won't move from that. We'll be done. When you find it, say amen. This is what I believe happened to Judas. Be angry and do not sin. He got corrected. He got angry. When you and I get angry, that anger builds up in us to the point to where if we're not careful, we will find ourselves in sin. Now, notice the scripture says, be